No, you can have this one. No, you're not
Okay.
going to.
So we're in Mark chapter 7.
Nope.
And if you'll recall, we chapter 6 went through several healings, the walking on the water. And then chapter 7 begins a confrontation with the Pharisees. Okay. So I will mention the fact that when you look at the Pharisees and you look at the way this always seems to work, if you look at the life of Jesus, you will always find that one group of people that he got angry with sometimes was the Pharisees. Okay. Now we talk about those who were sinners and the group, he showed compassion for them, but there are several times with the Pharisees that he gets frustrated. What we're going to find out is in some ways we're going to get a little bit of an idea of the issue here, is that they claimed to follow God, but they didn't really. Okay. So it says, now when the verse 1 begins, now when the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who'd come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. Okay. And then in parenthesis, verse 3 is, for the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, according to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. Mostly. So the idea here is that you don't know if something that you bought at the marketplace might have touched something unclean. So they have to wash. And like there are many other traditions, and so it goes on and it says, and there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. So they have a very, now this is important for us to notice real quick, because the reason Mark brings this up specifically, and he brings this to the forefront of all these weird traditions, and I say it that way, but all these traditions, is he's not writing to a Jewish audience. He's writing to a probably Roman audience. And so the audience wouldn't understand why they're throwing a fit about. Okay, so he's giving them, hey, you okay. Now, so the Pharisees and the scribes asked Jesus, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? Okay. And he said to them, well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites. Okay.
Can you imagine what they do if these guys bragging and you down the field?
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's make sure we do this real quick. So the word hypocrite. Okay. The word hypocrite is a transliteration, or is a moving over of a Greek word. Okay. Now, the term for hypocrite that we think of in Greek referred to an actor. Okay. And it really is kind of this, under a mask. Okay. Now, if you were to go to a Greek play of that day, you would find that they did not have a full cast. So one or two actors would play a whole bunch of roles. And what they would do is they would have masks, and they would hold a mask up. And when they held this mask, they were one character. And when they switched to a different mask, they were a different character. Okay. And so hypocrite, anytime you see in English, really, the HYPO, it's a Greek prefix that means under. Okay. That's hypo means under, or it's actually hupo in Greek. Okay. So think of a hypodermic needle is a needle that goes under the skin.
I know.
Okay. So hypocrites means under a mask. So it's a person who shows one face to the public and another face.
So
They're
like they're
two-faced.
two-faced.
That's what a hypocrite is. They're an actor. They pretend.
Right.
They're two-faced. So he says, well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites? So he's not being kind at all, as it is written. So now he's about to quote scripture, and he's quoting from Isaiah. And it's, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. This is from Isaiah 29:13. Okay, now watch. This is one of the primary reasons that the Pharisees and Jesus had such a adversarial relationship. Okay, that's why they didn't like each other. The Pharisees said they were followers of God, but it was only as deep as their actions. It was only lip service, right? We use that term when we talk about someone who says one thing and does another.
Yeah.
Okay. They say that they follow me, but their hearts are far from me. They're worshiping me in vanity. They are worshiping me in a way that doesn't actually count. Why? Because they're teaching as doctrines of God things that are actually commandments of man. Okay, so now watch. So we need context. The hand washing that they're getting so mad about is not
A teaching of God.
is not part of the law of Moses. It is something that they have added. Okay, and like I said, I don't know the whole tradition of it, but I'm sure that a big part of it is you're not supposed to touch anything unclean. Well, you don't know whether that thing that you touched maybe touched something else that touched something else that touched something else. And so remember that whenever we get to the point of after the exile, which is we're dealing with the changes that come from that here, they were so afraid that God was going to smack them again. Okay, remember, they had spent 900 years in idolatry.
Yeah.
Worshiping all these other gods, and worshiping all these other things. And God goes, I'm done. And he sacks Judah and he sends them off into captivity for 70 years. They come back, and really, idolatry was never their main issue after that. But what happens is the religious leaders of the day say, well, we got to make sure that they don't break the law, because then God will get us again. And so what they did is they built, and this is how they phrase it, they built a hedge around the law. They built rules and regulations that supposedly that you would break theirs before you ever broke God's law. So use the discussion here of saying the name of God. And we've talked about the fact that even in modern Judaism, when you read the scriptures, you don't say the name of God. Well, one of the commandments is don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Okay, then we just won't say it at all.
They go like super extra.
Don't ever say it, because you might not have exactly the right amount of awe for the name of God when you say it. So just say it. So it's a bit like the idea of, as a parent, you're worried about your kid touching the stove and burning his hand. And so instead of teaching them not to touch the stove, you just say, don't ever come in the kitchen. That's kind of the idea.
That makes sense.
Just stay out of the kitchen. Okay. So they are teaching as things that are commanded by God things that are just their own little rules. Okay. And in fact, it goes further. It says, you leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of men. Okay. And so then he gives the example, and this is a very interesting idea. And he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God. This is verse 9. In order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and whoever reviles father and mother must surely die. Both of those things are in the law of Moses. Honor your father and mother, and if somebody reviles their father and mother, they're to be put to death.
What does revile mean?
Hates
Or evil.
or
Okay.
does evil to their parents, or okay.
Okay.
Now, but you say, okay, so the law says this, but you say, well, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from me is korban, that is given to God. Okay, so here's the picture. The Pharisees have made this wonderful little rule.
So they would have to take care of their parents, huh?
Exactly. So, well, I know that you need rent money for this month, but I dedicated the money I was going to give you for rent to God, so I can't give you anything.
Which that's just like, that's disrespect to God, because God would rather you take care of your parents.
So, well, it actually comes to this. And by the way, this is in another place. Jesus has another place where he tells them you're tithing the mint in your garden, but you're not treating other people correctly. You're not showing mercy and grace to other people. And he goes, you really need to do both.
Yeah.
So it's okay to devote things to God, but you don't mistreat your parents under the, and by the way, this is kind of the trick, under the excuse.
Of it being for God.
So you're literally using God as a reason to mistreat your parents. Using it as an excuse. Okay. See, whatever you have gained from me is given to God. Then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father and mother. So even to this, and let me say, or at least this is part of what I would see in this. Okay. So you devote $500 to give to God as a gift. But before you've written the check, your parents call, your mom and dad call and say, hey, I've got an issue and I need $500.
So the right thing in that
Well,
would be to give it to your parents, and then
you are causing them to break one of the 10 commandments because of a issue that is not technically a biblical issue. Now, it does say that if you vow, then you're to do what you say.
yeah,
So it's not that you shouldn't give the money, but
it's you should maybe not vow.
well, and Jesus says that too, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Just let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Yeah. Not I swear or I
But
vow or I promise.
I think that you probably look at it this way, that you don't get to say, well, because I've said that I'm going to give that to God. And notice how it says, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother. So it's not that I've devoted this to God. Okay. Well, then you say, oh, no, you have to give it to God. You can't help your parents. Well, I think that you're probably still to give what you devoted to God, but maybe you can delay it 2 weeks and help your parents in their distress. See, the idea is not that you should, that it's a way to get out of what you devote from God. It's their attitude of them saying, no, you have to do it our way. And says, thus making void the word of God by your tradition. So no, don't follow the Bible, follow our tradition of what we say you're supposed to do. And he says, and there are many such things that you do. So this is not the only example. Okay. Then he goes on and he says, and he called,
Oh.
sorry. And he called the people to him again and said, hear me, all of you, and understand. So here, listen to me. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. Okay, so now we go back to this idea.
Nope.
What are they saying? Okay, so for a hygiene's sake, and this is part of this, it is good to wash your hands before you eat. But what he said, but that's not what they're dealing with. What they're dealing with is this idea that, well, you may have touched something that if it went inside you, it would defile you before God. And so you've got to make sure that you wash off anything that might have defiled you before you eat.
Is that why I got a question. Is that why the Orthodox Jews during Passover like put tinfoil on their tables and on all their surfaces?
I'm sure
Because they
there's
got
some level.
something about making it kosher again. I don't even know how you make something.
Remember that touching any kind of yeast.
They listed a bunch of stuff.
So the other thing that is interesting about that is, so not really easy, but technically bread can self-leaven. There is enough yeast in the air that will cause bread to rise somewhat.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not even know that.
But so, yeah, they're trying to purify and that kind of thing. I'm sure this is some of it, but the idea is the defiling.
That just seems super extreme.
Well, it is.
Like
they are
obsessive because
it's extreme. They are obsessed with not breaking the law. Although they break the law in their efforts to not break the law.
I would have been such a bad Jew.
Well, I would be done at pork. So
yeah, me too.
But anyway, so he goes to bring a discussion here. Okay. He says, hear me, all of you, and understand. There's nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. But the things that come out of a person are what defile him.
So be careful what you say,
huh? Okay. The idea is your words and your actions can defile you, not what you eat. Now, at the same time, also remember, according to the law of Moses, touching what comes out defiles you. So he's making a point based on that. In fact, I'll mention this in Deuteronomy. The rules that most campers use today come straight out of the book of Deuteronomy, where it says that when you need to go out to the restroom, take a spade with you and dig a hole and then cover it up. That's actually a biblical principle for the camps of Israel. Why? Because it causes illness. Well, so he is speaking under something that they would have said, yes, human excrement would defile you. In fact, we see it in Ezekiel where he says, hey, I want you to make your fire out of dung. And he goes, can I please at least use cow dung so that I'm not defiling myself? Because his original discussion was use human dung to make your fire.
But how could using cow dung be any less defiling? I would have.
Once it's dried enough to burn, there's no issue.
It's mostly grass, huh?
Yeah, it's mostly grass.
Oh.
I mean, they use it as toys out on the farm.
Well, back in a lot of them use the cow and they're fires because that's all they can have the wood and stuff.
Well, you think around about here, there, I mean, except for all the elms that got planted, there were no trees.
Yeah.
And so there's so much grass and fiber in it that it makes really good fire. It makes a really good fire. And everything that's bad about it dries out and dies.
That's where the good mushrooms grow too.
So, I mean, but
Yeah.
that is
I had to think about that for a minute. I was like,
there,
that one almost went over my head.
the truth
Goes
of
over most people's head.
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is that was something in the book of Ezekiel. God says, hey, because, I'm showing what's going on, you have to use a dung fire because you're not going to have, that's all you're going to have. And he goes, can I please at least use cow dung so that I'm not being defiled by using human feces as a fire source? And God says, okay, yes. Okay. So there is a level at which Jesus is kind of upping an ante that is already there, that it's what comes out of a person that defiles him.
Yeah.
But he's not talking about just fecal matter. He's talking about their words and their actions. And so it says, and when he had entered the house and left the people, the disciples asked about the parable. And he said to them, then are you also without understanding?
Mine says, are you so dull?
Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart, but his stomach, and is expelled? Okay, now he is stating something here that is further brought up in the book of Acts. And Mark says it, thus he declared all foods clean.
Yeah.
Okay. The Jewish dietary law was a matter of obedience, not because of defiling. And so he says, don't you understand? And this is a very powerful thing. In the concept of God, it is your heart that is defiled.
Gotcha.
Okay. And it says, when you eat food, it doesn't go to your heart. It goes to your stomach and then out your intestines, and then eventually you let out what's left. So it can't defile you. Because it's processed in the stomach and expelled. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, so now notice the heart, okay, comes evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, pride, foolishness. All of these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. Now watch, because this is very interesting to look at. When he's talking to the Pharisees, let me ask a question. Which one of that list do you think is their problem? Well, probably at some level, all of them, but there's one that's primary over all the others, probably for the Pharisees at least.
Arrogance.
Pride.
Pride.
We are the ones that follow God. We are the ones who get to decide whether you're doing what you're supposed to. We are the ones who.
Which is stupid nowadays.
Their pride defiles them before God. Understand that it is pride that is the root of legalism. Okay. And remember, that is the problem we're dealing with in the New Testament. We are dealing with a group of people who think that they have the corner on how you follow God.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does that come from? It comes from pride and arrogance. And we know that I can't remember which gospel it sits in just off the top of my head, but remember there's a story, another parable that Jesus tells where he says there's this Pharisee and this tax collector, and they both go to the synagogue to pray. And so the Pharisee walks in and he goes up right up next to the altar, and maybe even it's the temple, but he goes right up to the front and he stands there and he raises his arms and he says, "Oh Lord, thank you that you didn't make me like that guy."
That's just a little bit of pride.
That's a lot of pride.
Thank you that I'm so much more holy than that guy.
No.
It's also judgment.
Yeah.
Mhm. But that's the same discussion. Judgment always comes out of pride. Now, here's the fun part. Even self-judgment comes out of pride. So now watch. This sounds so reverse. Okay. If I say that I am too wicked for God to love me, that's pride.
I fall in that trap sometimes.
Okay.
That
So
my sins are so bad that God could never forgive me. Even though most of me believes and knows that God's already forgiven me, I get stuck in that trap that I am just so horrible. How could he ever love me? Like,
So-
that's
He loves you because you're his child.
Mhm. But let me make sure you understand why that fits under the idea of pride and arrogance. Because what you're saying, although you don't really think of it that way, I am the one person who's so good at being bad that even God can't forgive me.
ooh, ouchie, my toes hurt.
I actually dealt with this. I was probably in my 30s, but I kept feeling that the sins that I had in the past, that some reason God couldn't forgive me, and so in my prayer He revealed to me that the sin was pride. And he asked me, he said, "You don't have any trouble with me forgiving the woman at the well or the older lady or whatever? You didn't have any trouble with me forgiving them. So fine, do you have trouble with me forgiving you?" He said, "Your sin is pride." And I didn't realize it.
And that's almost the first one on the list most of the time. But I joke with people every once in a while, and I've said it a few times, that say, if you're one of those people like John in 1 John, where it says, if you have no sin,
That's the first
you
one.
say if you say you have no sin.
Oh, that's your first sin.
So that's your first sin. Because if you say you have no sin, then you have, and what 1 John says is you've called God a liar.
So it's like the extreme to the other end.
Right.
Like I have so much sin.
Mhm.
Okay.
That even God couldn't help me.
Well, I know God can help me.
I'm beyond the help of God. It's arrogance. It's and almost to the point of saying it's false humility, which is arrogance. I'm so bad. I'm so worthless. That can be an act of pride because you treat yourself as worthless, but it's not real. It's false humility. Real humility is knowing that you have value, but choosing to lower yourself for others. False humility is acting like you're worthless for your own benefit. And we've all seen it. Typically, and one of the ways that it demonstrates itself is that person that, and we've all met them, that is eternally a victim of their circumstance.
Oh, yes.
Nothing's ever really their fault. It's just everything goes wrong around me, and this person hurt me, and this person hurt me, and I'm just worthless because this person did this, and this person did that, and this person did this, and they can never get past it. Well, in some level, they take pride in their pain. It's become their identity, and they take pride in it. And what does that mean?
Keep
It
up
comes to
with
the
the
point they
phone.
can't forgive
Quit eating phone.
because their entire identity, their entire self-worth is based on their victimhood.
Mom's gonna change your diapers.
And so they
What
can't
is she gonna
forgive.
eat?
Which means, and this is very important, the Bible is absolutely and unequivocally clear. If we do not forgive the trespasses of others against us, God does not forgive us. The Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors.
Let me pull a chair.
He tells a parable about it, and he says, look, this guy owed a king, and by the way, when you look at the money amounts that he's talking about, it says this guy owed a king $182 million. And the king says, hey, it's time to pay up. And he goes, well, I don't have that much money. He goes, and the king says, I'm going to throw you in jail and I'm going to make you do forced labor. You're going to join the chain gang until you pay back, until you've done enough work to pay it back. And he begs and says, I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you. And the king has compassion on him and forgives his debt. Doesn't just give him more time,
Forgives it.
forgives it. And then he goes out and finds his buddy who owed him $50 and has him thrown in jail because he can't repay the $50.
Which is just.
The king hears about it and goes, okay, if you're not going to forgive, then your debt's back on. If I forgave you that much and you can't be forgiving of $50, there's something wrong. And I'm not belittling or I'm not lessening anybody's pain from other people. But when you come down to the fact that we are responsible for causing a separation from Jesus and the Father and causing his death, we are legally culpable for the death of the Son of God. And yet we have been forgiven of that. Then we should be able to forgive others what they've done to us. And that's the picture. So when we're unforgiving, guess what it is? It's pride again. And it may not look like pride, but it is. It's, well, I've been hurt worse than everybody else, so I shouldn't have to forgive. That's pride. It's
There's always
arrogance.
somebody out there that's had it worse.
And by the way, let's just make sure we understand. Pride is a foundational element of all sin.
Say that again.
Pride is a foundational element of all sin.
So all sin has a
Element of
element
pride
of
to
pride.
it. So remember, so in the Garden of Eden,
Yeah.
okay, it gives this specific, and one of the New Testament writers brings this back up. Okay. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Okay. So we go back to, that's in 1 John, I believe. In Genesis, whenever Eve is shown the apple, it says she saw that it looked good, the lust of the eyes.
Yeah.
It would be good for food, so it would be nutritious, so the lust of the flesh. And it will make me like God, the pride of life. When we look at all of this list that it says comes out of a man, let's deal. Evil thoughts. I get to think my way. I don't care what God says. Pride. Sexual immorality. I know that God has planned for sex to be part of a marriage covenant, but I don't care. I'm going to do it my way. Pride. Theft. I know God's going to provide, but I want this and I'm going to take it. Pride. Adultery. Yeah, I know she's married, but I want her. Pride. Coveting. I know it belongs to somebody else, but I want it and I deserve it. Pride. Wickedness. Deceit. Well, I know I should tell the truth, but I'm going to get out of it so that I don't get in trouble. Pride.
What does lewdness mean?
Dirty thoughts,
Oh, okay.
sensuality,
Okay.
envy, slander, foolishness. They all contain an element of pride. Why? Because they are all examples of us in our pride rebelling against God. Now, we may not recognize the pride part of it every time, but it is always there. So we come back to the Pharisees. Why was the relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees so bad? Is they were so prideful of their religion that they refused to follow God. And so what he says is all of these things come out of a person, they come out of the heart, and they will defile. What you eat won't defile you. It's your actions and your words and the pride that comes out of your heart that defiles you.
Elijah.
I'll do it my way.
I'll do it my way. By the way, don't miss, that's the whole thing of that song. I did it my way. I don't need any help. I did it my way.
My way
And
sucks.
by the way, American culture falls into that. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Self-made man.
I'm a self-made man. I'm a self-made millionaire. Self-help, self-esteem, self-worth, self.
It's all about the self.
Even to the point of self-sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
Look, I'll tell you, the biggest book business in the entire world right now is self-help.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it is.
How do you do it yourself? And I will tell you without a slightest bit of movement, that is not how God saw it. You turn to me for help and I change you. Now, am I saying you should never read a self-help book? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is make sure that you're relying on the right person for your help.
I got a question. What is that word?
Syrophoenician.
Okay, thank you.
It's a country.
Oh, it is?
She's from Tyre and Sidon. Phoenicia is Syria and Phoenicia are countries in that area that would have been there, and that's where she's from.
Okay.
Okay.
I just knew it was a big word.
So let's go to verse 24. Let's continue. And from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Now, Tyre and Sidon are on the northern side of Israel, right on the coast. Okay, they're port cities. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. So he was trying to not let anybody know he was in town, but it didn't work. Okay. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. Okay. So this woman shows up, falls at his feet in this house where he's staying. This woman was a Gentile. She was a Phoenician, a Syrophoenician. Now, here is the thing that would also make her probably under the group of, in the Old Testament, of what we would think of as a Philistine. Okay, which was a group of people that the Israelites didn't really like.
Yeah.
But she's from Phoenicia, Phoenicia is technically in Africa. Syria is north of Israel. So her family was Phoenician, which was a group of seafaring people. And she probably was born in Syria, which is north of Israel.
That's what mine says. She was Greek and born in Syria.
Okay. So she begs Jesus to cast the demon out of her daughter. Okay. And he said to her, let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now that's harsh, or it feels harsh. However, I think there's a reason behind this. And I look, there are places in the scripture we go, wait, hold on. What he's saying to her is, I've come for the children of Israel, and you are not. So why should I help you? It is somewhat of a kind of a harsh way of saying it, and it's a little confusing how it is. Okay, but he's saying, why should I give you what I've come to give for someone else? Okay. And she answers him, and this is the most profound statement. Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. So he's saying, I've come for the children of Israel. Why should I give you what is supposed to go to them? And her answer is, look, all I'm asking is for the crumbs from the table. And he says to her, for this statement, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter. Now, in another place, it says, I have not seen this kind of faith in all of Israel. Okay. So Jesus is speaking of his primary audience. His primary audience is Israel. Now, there are some Gentiles that he heals. He heals the son of a Roman centurion, and then this woman. But it's clear she's not an official. And even the story of the Roman centurion, the Jews come to him and say, "Hey, this centurion, he's been really good to us.
Yeah.
He's a man of God. He's following God. Will you help?" And he does. In this case, it's just this Gentile woman who shows up and says, my daughter has a demon. Can you help her? And he says, well, I'm here for the children of Israel. Why should I give you what belongs to them? And she goes, I don't want what belongs to them. I just want the crumbs they've dropped. That's all I need is the crumbs they dropped off the table. And he says, okay. She's well.
Yeah, that's not gonna work. Okay.
So what happened? Her faith. In a way, her response says, all I'm doing is I'm trusting in your goodness. Can I please just have a crumb? And I would tell you that while it sounds harsh in our culture, my guess would be that it comes across differently in Jewish writings
Don't lean on it.
at that time. Because remember, there's another one of those that we fight over sometimes, that at the first miracle of Jesus in the Gospel of John, Mary comes to him and says, hey, they ran out of wine. And he goes, well, what do I have to do with you, woman?
Like, why is it any of your business?
Right.
So,
but understand that the word there in our culture, to call your mother woman, is very derogatory. In their culture, that would not have been the case. Hey, and he goes, hold on, what do I have to do? What does this have to do with me? Is really what he asks. He goes, so what are you wanting me to do about it? And then the funny thing is, in that story, Mary doesn't even respond. She just turns to the guys and says, do whatever he tells you.
like assuming,
Like she already assumes he's going to do it.
of course he's gonna
So
do it.
maybe even the way he said it, Michelle and I joke around about this all the time, about the issue with people who are very sarcastic and texting on a phone. That sarcasm does not translate into text.
It really does not.
Okay. And Michelle and I have had a couple of times where we've had a little bit of a brouhaha because I said something sarcastic over text and she didn't know it was sarcastic. So we have joked that the thing that we're going to do to make millions of dollars is we're going to come up with a sarcastic font
Oh, that would be awesome.
for a phone.
That would be super awesome.
So that when you're being sarcastic, you just shift it over to that font and then they go, oh, he's being sarcastic. Although I will be fair, there is a level at which my wife would tell you, how do you know when I'm being sarcastic? My mouth moves, but I tend to be pretty sarcastic.
And it's hard to put the word of your mouth
And it is.
on the machine.
But it is also the reason why, and I've told somebody this before, when you have somebody angry with you, do not text them,
Oh, no.
call them. Because if you text something to them because they're angry with you, they will take it in the worst possible light it can be taken.
Mhm.
Because you cannot see facial expressions.
Or hear the influx of the
Or
voice.
hear the influx of the voice, or see the chuckle,
Yeah.
or anything. And so, in a way, sometimes we have to deal with this discussion that we do not know how Jesus said this. So we read into it what we would think if we were saying it, or if someone said it to us. And it feels harsh and it feels kind of unkind. But the thing that we can take some comfort in is, what other place in the Bible is Jesus unkind to somebody who's desperate for help? And the answer is never.
Yeah.
So it must not mean that. There must be something we are not catching there, because Jesus is not that way. But the idea is, he's come to this place, he's outside of Israel. This Gentile woman comes to him and says, please help my daughter. And in a way that we don't completely understand, he basically asks, so why should I give to you what belongs to someone else? And she responds, that's not what I'm asking you for. I'm asking for the crumbs off the table.
Basically calls her a dog.
Well, the word dog here, though, it's not dog in the derogatory sense. It's little puppy.
Oh, okay.
What?
Yes.
It's little puppy.
Okay.
But it's the pet.
It's the pet.
So notice, because this is the idea, and this certainly does translate. Why would you take the bread for the children and give it to the dog under the table?
Yeah.
So I've made dinner for the kids, and right when the kids come to get ready to eat, I take their plate and I give it to the dog.
That would be wrong. Although the kids, in all fairness, give half of it.
But
to the
what
dog
she,
anyway.
but that's her answer. But you don't kick the dog out of the house and not let them grab what falls off the kid's plate.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, we do, because our dogs are food aggressive, but that's
Oh, boy.
boy, it's really bad when the dog won't eat what the kids have on the plate. All right, we're gonna stop there. We will pick up on verse 31.
All done. Boom.
Sorry, there were a few extra rabbits today, but
You don't say.